Welcome everyone to our RISE online seminar. And today it will be Andrei giving us a presentation on data leaks in health data transition. So thank you very much.
Thanks. So hi everyone, how's everyone doing? So today I'm going to talk a little bit about data leaks when transferring health data. And yeah, let's just start. So let's assume that we have a smartband that records, let's say, heartbeat on a wrist. Then it sends the data via Bluetooth towards the dedicated mobile application. Application stores it, and then later sends it to the cloud. And then via public internet. And this data in the cloud is kind of permanently stored in some kind of a database. And then manufacturers are using this data as they please. So what do you think would be the easiest, what would be the weakest link in this chain? What would be, for an attacker, from where would be the most probable chance to obtain this data? So if we look, if we look at the smartband itself and the Bluetooth link, it's definitely possible. There have been a number of works that show that such data can be intercepted or leaked. However, in most cases, it would require like a physical access to this. So this attack cannot be launched somewhere remotely. An attacker has to be present in the same room, perhaps, or maybe like, I don't know, in the proximity of 20 meters, and then set up something. Some attacks included, like, for instance, flashing corrupted firmware on the band. Some attacks include intercepting the Bluetooth traffic with Ubertooth-like devices. So you have to kind of basically get your hands on the band at the location. So it's probably possible, although it's not very unique. Even if you somehow know the technology to attack a particular smartband, it wouldn't work for another one. Like if you know how to attack, let's say, Apple Watch, it wouldn't. This is the very same technology wouldn't work for I don't know, Xiaomi band or Fitbit band. So probably not very likely. Even though it might be possible, it's going to be very hard. Then we have our phone. Here the attack is also possible. There have been some exploits found for some particular version of Android or iOS that are vulnerable to some kind of attack that allow an adversary to access internal memory and perhaps even like unblock it somehow. But that's the nature of an exploit. Exploits, they are designed to target a specific model of OS or model of a device, so it wouldn't work universally. And patches are released frequently if some attack is, exposed out there, so and reported to be dangerous. There's going to be a patch 100%, and the attack probably not going to work on a high scale. Maybe once or twice if you know someone who has a smartband and a vulnerable phone, and you also have to be in a close proximity, obviously, for that kind of attacks, or inject some remote malware there. So it's going to be very hard. Then we have the cloud. The cloud is probably the second most probable one because the attacks on cloud are very frequent and are very devastating. They are when they are successful, they are very devastating. We hear on the news every now and then about the big databases being leaked, like millions of passwords from somewhere or millions of credit cards numbers or whatnot, and they are like very, very severe and very detrimental for the companies who maintain those databases. But unfortunately for the attacker, that's probably the highest, the most threatening risk for the company. So they are addressing it a lot. They allocate a lot of resources to fight various kinds of SQL attacks or some other attacks that could compromise their clouds. And it's possible, but it's very hard. But it's possible, but very hard. So, and besides that, it's not even really connected with the world of wearable devices or Internet of Sports, as our topic is, because if you can attack a database of health data from Fitbit, for instance, you can use the same technology to attack maybe like some bank or maybe government. So it's not even necessarily that it's very specific for the domain of wearable devices. So what's the answer then? The answer is then a link between the phone and the cloud, which is called public internet. So basically, what happens when you synchronize your app with the vendor servers is that they just send the data you've been collecting from your wearable device to the cloud, and the data is then somehow being delivered. And this somehow is not some kind of magic. It's impossible to just kind of send information over air without traces. So that's what we call public internet. And public internet is basically what we understand by public internet. Public internet is a set of entities who transfer data all over the internet. And those entities, we mostly refer them to as internet service providers or ISPs. So how does it work? For example, I'm living in the United States and I want to synchronize my data with China. So I launch the synchronization procedure from my app. Then it connects to some ISP in United States. Then that ISP perhaps sends my data further to some ISP, let's say in India, maybe. And from India, let's say it goes to China. The user has zero control over how the data will be sent. It might be sent the shortest possible way, might be sent the longest possible way. So it's all defined by so-called like routing tables, which are outside of the control of individual user. And yeah, basically, there is no way to track how your data being delivered. And what ISP is basically, you can refer it as a big set of computers. The data passes through those computers, and in principle, it's just they don't even need to spy or anything. It just goes through their machines. They can simply record it, and no one would even say anything. So we say that this link is probably the most probable way for health data to be leaked. So yeah, why? Yeah, the only problem is you just grab the data over there, and then everything is kind of good for an attacker, right? You have all the data and everything's happy, but not quite, because the data is encrypted, obviously. Well, most of the data will be encrypted. And despite that, we argue that despite the data being encrypted, it still most likely will be the easiest path for an attacker to get the data, because as we noted, there is no secure storage. Neither it's not phone or a cloud. The data is not secured. Basically, any ISP along the way that data travels can easily get a copy of the data without interfering in the process of sending it. Just grab it, and basically that's it. Secondly, it's very hard to call it even calling it stealing or like some kind of intercepting, because the ISP are designed to transfer the data. So it's like we are willingly sending the data to be our data to be transferred there. So data is kind of we are consciously allow the data to go to these entities. And then the other part is internet traversal, because yeah, we can be somewhere in India intercepting data from United States, and how the hell you even like gonna tell that this is what it has been like even us? Because yeah, it can be any other ISP. So we don't have to be locally present in the presence of our victims to collect the data, because yeah, we can be anywhere basically. All right, as we noticed, only small problem is that the data is encrypted and is not really observable as such. And a quick history into encryption: we are currently internet is mostly using this transport layer security or TLS encryption, which was adopted in 1999, replacing previous version of CCL, which was proved to be unsecure. Currently, we have TLS 1.3, which was released in 2018, so 2 years ago, give or take, and it addresses a lot of bugs, a lot of previous vulnerabilities. But still, it wasn't until 2013 that the internet became ubiquitously secured because, well, there was this famous whistleblower from the United States, Edward Snowden, who revealed a global surveillance program by United States government, which later was proved illegal. He attributes a lot of current encryption to himself, maybe, but still, the fact is that before 2013, the number of encrypted traffic all over the internet was below 50%. And in a recent report, which was released a couple of days ago by Google, they claim that the current ratio of encrypted traffic is 95%. Although this report was more like a commercial or advertisement for the Google Chrome than for actual, report independent, but still, the trend is clear that the internet is getting more and more encrypted, if you will, and sooner or later, all the data will be encrypted. So how does TLS work? What's the main point of TLS? TLS combines both symmetric and asymmetric encryption. By symmetric encryption, we imply that the text is encrypted and can be later unencrypted with the same key, and asymmetric with different keys. So basically, just a very high-level idea of TLS is that the client has to first to verify that the server it tries to connect is indeed the server, like to authenticate it, that it's indeed the server that it tries to pose as. Then they need to agree on a symmetric key, and later data exchange will be using this symmetric keys they agreed on. Let me see. Yeah, so for validation of a server's identity, TLS employs a so-called certification. So the grand idea of certification is that someone who is trusted, that would be, we call a root CA. So root CA is someone who is kind of self-signed. The root CA is trusted by itself, and you don't kind of need to verify that root CA is trusted. It is trusted by default. And root CA can say, okay, by the way, this certification procedure is not free, it costs money. So some website would pay some money to say, okay, look, I want you to say that I'm indeed myself. And root CA would say, okay, here's your public key, here's your certificate, you pay me money, and later on I will claim, I will verify, I will vouch for you, and I'll say that you are indeed, let's say, secureband.com. And then later on, this secureband.com, if some client connects to it, it would send a copy of its certificate to the client, and also will verify, will provide a digital signature over some of the test data that user would send, and this way user would see that indeed this guy is trusted by Google, and I see that that its digital signature corresponds to what is written in certificate. So basically, this entity is trusted. There is also such idea as sub-CA. Sub-CA basically is a second link before root CA, and yeah, basically sub-CA can also, they have a privilege to verify some other users, I think. And there can be also sub-CAs. I think the most structures do not expand more than 3 steps, so it could be at most sub-CA, but don't quote me on that. I think it's like this. And those root CAs, just a quick, well, maybe I'll talk about it later. So the idea is basically that with this certificate, a user can verify that the server is indeed who is supposed to be. Yeah, and then we have, after the client verifies that server is okay, they generate a symmetric key using asymmetric encryption. And then, so client would send something using a server public key, and then server would, using its private key, would decrypt it and say, okay, that's a secret. And they, later on with this key, they exchange the data encrypted with this key. So this is very secure, and it's not possible to break it. Maybe not now, maybe sometime later with quantum computing it will be possible. But the idea is that for now, we kind of ground truth is that we assume as ground truth that this algorithm is secure, and we have no means to unencrypt the data. But still, there might be some leaks that we might infer from the encrypted traffic. We'll talk about it a little bit later. So what doesn't TLS encryption hide from the third-party observer? First of all, the contacted site. So if it's google.com, there is no possible way to conceal that I am contacting google.com. Then the length of the subfolder. So if I'm contacting google.com/smartbands, that /smartbands could be encrypted using later communications, but it's still approximate length of it would be visible to an attacker. Then the most important point comes the length of the transferred information. So basically, this is the key that enables the leaks in transferring health data. And those basically say that encryption is not hashing. There is no way to conceal the size of encrypted data. If it's like 500 characters, then approximately the size of plain text will be also 100 characters and such. Also, the timestamps can be not concealed, so we can see the times when the encrypted packets are being sent, etc. And IP address. IP address is perhaps the most important because, as I already said, public internet is supported by this concept of ISPs, and in order for ISP to know where to send data further, it needs to have an IP, because without an IP, the packet will travel basically forever and will never reach its destination. Yeah, for intercepting traffic, like ISPs don't need to do that, but if, like for instance, someone wants to intercept traffic on a local setup, there are various tools. I just highlight some of them: Wireshark, TCP dump, or Snort. There are many, many more. So how is it? Why is this attack TLS in smartbands? How is it different for smartbands? Let's try to have a look. So yeah, so its data is encrypted. There is no way we can 100% say what's inside, but still, TLS doesn't hide the length of the visited HTML page, or in our case, of visited length of the information. So if I, for instance, send from the phone 500 bytes to the cloud, I can say that encrypted traffic would be also around 500 bytes. That's the general idea. But it's not enough, right? We need somehow learn what's being sent prior drawing any conclusions about what encrypted traffic might be hiding, what might be inside encrypted traffic. So to learn ground truth, we'll employ an interesting setup. Probably many of you are already familiar, which is called man-in-the-middle proxy. The main idea of man-in-the-middle proxy is for us to convince our phone, our app inside the phone, that the proxy that we set up is the server. So the phone will think, okay, I'm contacting the server, like the cloud server of the manufacturer company. But in reality, it would be our, like, honeypot, if you will, our like decoy that would collect all the data, and this proxy would have capabilities to decrypt it, to see what's inside, and then later re-encrypt it and send to the cloud. So the idea is we would kind of see what's inside, and then we might be able to, because we know we obviously can intercept encrypted traffic, we might see what's in plain text, and maybe we can draw some conclusions from those pairs, right? That's what the idea. The main, well, I to be honest, I know of two man-in-the-middle proxies, Burpsuit and Fiddler. There might be more. I'm sure there are more, but those are maybe the most known ones. So here is, for instance, a screenshot from a real smartband and how it works. So you see that this line 105 that is highlighted is basically the entry for sending heart rate data. And it shows an IP address, it shows a length, it shows the port, it shows also what's inside. So I can see what's being sent, and I can see which values might be changing over time, which are constant. For example, user ID is probably always the same, app ID is probably always the same, but perhaps the heart rate is not the same. It's sent in URL encoding format, and here's like a translation, decoding, if you will. And for example, this is the rate SQ equal, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 79. So for example, of course, there is no way to tell from encrypted traffic. It will be complete gibberish, but that's a start. We analyze what's data being sent and what's encrypted to see how it goes. But the problem with this is that man in the middle doesn't have cloud certificate. So it's just bluntly say, okay, to our app, we want to trick our app, to fool our app. If we say to our app that, okay, my man in the middle proxy is Google, it won't believe it, because they say, okay, show me certificate, and obviously I cannot show any certificates because we don't have any. No one verified us. So we have to make our phone trust our man in the middle certificate. So every man in the middle, like Fiddler or Burp, they have their own certificates. Not Google certificate, but their own. And obviously they're not trusted by default because they're not root CAs. And we need to make our phone to say, okay, I believe those certificates, they are trusted. Because otherwise phone would just say, okay, I don't know who this guy is, I'm not sending any data, and abort the connection, and wouldn't send anything. So we should first to add certificate to be trusted in our phone. So for this, I'm not sure about iOS phones, but in Android, it's pretty straightforward. Certificate can be added in so-called trusted credentials. So here we see system and user. User would be my own certificate, or like man in the middle certificate that I would add, and system are that are here by default. And actually, be surprised to look through those. Every phone you have a list of those trusted entities by default, and some of those names are really suspicious. If you scroll, they are like China, blah, 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 government. So it's like we kind of by default, we are trusting them. Well, maybe we should. Or like, for instance, Microsoft, and we all know that Microsoft is collecting all the data. Oh, Google, by the way, also. So they are trusted by default, but they are perhaps maybe, but they are kind of, it happened before us. They agreed to be those kings on the hill, and no one can push them from it. And yeah, and they're actually earning a lot of money because, for instance, it's like Affirm Trust. I have no idea who this is, but apparently they are granting certificates to others, and it's not free. It costs a lot of money if you want to do a certificate yourself. If you want for your website, for your web service a certificate, it would cost your money. So it's a business. It's like nothing personal, as they say, right? Okay, but there is also like a technique that some app developers are able to use in order to prevent those kind of man-in-the-middle attacks. It's called certificate pinning or SSL pinning, this technique. And the key idea is that the developer can embed inside the app certificates that are trusted. So okay, I know that my vendor servers has this certificate, and I can input it in the app. So it would be impossible for any other certificate to be accepted by the app. I think many, like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and some others, as far as I know, are using the certificate pinning technique. So basically, if you have whatever, like even if you have, if you have any amount of important data being sent to your company server, it's kind of a necessity in the modern world. So yeah, it's nowadays it's more often than not, you will be, if you are doing this kind of stuff, you will encounter certificate pinning in the Android apps, and I think iOS as well, although I'm not sure about that. So, but it's not an end of the world. It's still possible to bypass this defense, and it's like actually not that hard. In order to disable certificate pinning, reverse engineering toolkits could be utilized. Frida, like I listed it, Frida exposed frameworks. There are many more, but the idea of those is that they are so-called runtime libraries that are able to hook up during the code execution, and they sort of like when you decompile Android apps, they decompile it into like Smalley code or like Java code. The same goes here, but instead of decompiling it into code, they decompile it into logic blocks. And once I discover a logic block that is responsible for checking the keys, for instance, like this, we have like a abstraction, they have some other process, and we have like this check keys, if indeed this certificate is embedded in the app or not. And if it's not, then we abort the TLS connection. If it's not, then we continue. So those runtime libraries that are able to detect those conditions, and they are going straight to continue. It's basically the same technique as, you know, when like back then when computer games were distributed on CDs, there was this like protection. You cannot use CD without, you cannot run the game without a legal CD, right? It's basically the same. Like in the date, pirates would do exactly that. They would disable this disk, compact CD disk verification exactly in the same way as they disable in here the checking keys of or checking certificates of an app. So if we do that, we can bypass the app, and we can indeed, once we do this, we can see all of this. So maybe not very trivial, but man in the middle can be set up 100% of the times, basically. And after that, we can analyze the pairs of encrypted traffic and what's actually this encrypted traffic correspond to. Yeah. So let's talk about data leaks then. Let's assume that we are measuring heart rate, and we're sending it to the cloud. And we don't, as an ISP, we obviously don't have access to the plain text, only to the ciphertext, to the encrypted text. And let's say we once measure our heart rate at 80 BPM and later at 100 BPM. The difference between those is that 100 is 1 character longer than 80. And that would translate into our ciphertext being 1 character longer. So if I know for sure, for like 100% that this ciphertext represents heart rate, I can say that it's 100% a 3-digit number. It might be 100, might be 1999. Well, I mean, physically, but there is no possible way to distinguish between those. But it is possible to distinguish between those and between M and MN, because that would show that this one is 1 character longer, which translates into 1 bit longer plain text, which translates that this data is this BPM is at least 100. And this is already a privacy leak, right? This is already by itself a privacy leak. If you can say that, okay, this person has abnormal heart rates, he's actually like an athlete who does a lot of like exercise, or maybe a person with like maybe some heart problems, I don't know. So it's already, it might be a very, very serious for person being profiled. But heart rate is not the only thing that can be detected. A similar approach can be used to identify stuff like duration of workouts, number of steps taken, perhaps the type of workout, or maybe some more sophisticated smartbands. They allow users to record their food consumption, coffee consumption. Some even have like this women health tracking and stuff. So it's all, if you put enough resources into it, if you try it, all possible combinations of data being possibly sent, you can say, okay, there is no other option for this but to be exactly this type of data. And you can say, okay, this user is doing this. And if you monitor this user for like months, you can say, okay, this user has this habit or this habit. So it's very serious. It might be very serious, of course, in the best case scenario. So let's look at the attacks that we kind of we have in mind. So we have a smart band on the left-hand side. Actually, there is also a left-hand side on the picture, funny, that sends data to mobile app. And then from the mobile app, it sends it via router to the storage. And obviously, in most of the cases, it would be just one ISP that would be in the middle. It would be many, many ISPs that are transferring data between each other before it finally reaches its destination. And any of those ISP can basically, with enough, incentives, they could go kind of on the dark side and become like this honest but curious ISP. What we mean by this honest but curious ISP is an entity or an ISP who is honest in a sense that it would transmit all the data. It wouldn't drop any data. It wouldn't, wouldn't do anything illegal. It wouldn't try to actively modify the packets. It wouldn't try to any active attacks, but it can record like a copy of all the data that passes through it. There is no harm in doing it, and it's even not maybe illegal if you can argue. So it's kind of like unpunishable, if you will. It's honest, but it's just it looks every now and then and tries maybe to infer something from the traffic it can forward. And by the way, these ISPs can be like anywhere. Anyone can become an ISP. For instance, even like I don't know, if you work in an organization, they also an ISP, right? Because they collect all the data from all the users and then transfer it from the organization towards the outer world and vice versa. So yeah, basically it's not even like, major service providers like maybe Vodafone or I don't know, Amazon or someone else. It can be basically anyone can become an ISP. And who knows, like, yeah, especially if you're like a local ISP, you can profile local users, etc. So it's not as harmless as it might look on the first glance. So how would it work? Let's say that I want to become a shadow ISP and I want to profile users of, let's say, of a Apple Watch. How would I proceed? So first, the ISP needs to obtain a copy of a smartband. And we go to discovering the ground truth with a setup with a man in the middle setup. So ISP would do a local setup. It would play around, try to send different types of data, different values of data. Heart rate equal 60, heart rate equal 420, whatever, and then all possible combinations in order to discover any privacy leaks, if there are any for this particular smartband. Then it would, after it discovered the ground truth, it would try to look at this data leaks. Like we mentioned, for instance, if the band that I showed you here, it sends heart rate in this 4-digit encoding always. So no matter what the heart rate is, it's always be represented by 4 digits. So it's in principle, it's indistinguishable. But there are other bands that I also saw in my personal, like I've worked with them personally, that are sending data exactly in this format, like 100 or 80 without any encoding. So yeah, in principle, ISP can easily distinguish between those heart rates that are like below 100 or above 100. And some others like workouts, duration of workouts, perhaps number of workouts, daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. So after ISP knows all the possible leaks for that particular smartband that it bought, purchased for a specific, like for yeah, whatever, and then after it knows all these leaks for that specific smartband, it could launch the mass profiling system, which consists of basically what it would do. It would gather all the IP addresses for the cloud, for the server, right? Because the data goes towards the server, and server might be one computer, might be like 10 computers, but it's not important because there cannot be assigned infinite number of IP addresses to those clusters that securely store the databases of all users. It's got to be limited, and after it might be a day, might be a month, but once ISP gradually, very like every like constantly trying to send some data to the cloud, after a while, a pool of possible IP addresses will be exhausted. There will be no new IP address anymore, and the ISP say, okay, I think I gathered all the possible ISPs that are associated with the servers that store the data of users. And once all those IP addresses are learned, the ISP filters all the traffic that it gathers, because obviously it doesn't get the data just from users of smartband. It gets many millions, perhaps, of other packets from various places to transfer to forward to some other destinations. And of course, most of like 99.9999% of the traffic is not smartband traffic. But once it applies this IP addresses rules, it would be that it might be still that some of those addresses are not only for storage, but for some other operations for this website of the companies. But still, now we can apply our metadata rules. So we say, okay, if, for instance, if you look at this heart rate for this device, it sends 108 and 104 and 105 packets to represent heart rate. So those, even though if the ISP knows that those two packets are necessary in order to send heart rate, it cannot just utilize the size of this packet, but also the order of the packets and the size of the other packets. So with all these meta rules, the probability of false positive will be reduced dramatically. It would be, well, not for some, for some it's more, for some it's less, but still, once you know the destination IP address, this is 44 dot blah, 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 blah. Once you know this, and once you know that there should be two packets, one of them should be exactly 1,200 bits, for instance, and the second one is ranging between 300 and 400 bits, then there got to be not that many packets that are, you know, that fall into this category. And the ISP can safely assume that, yeah, this might be actually the heart rate data that we're interested in. So yeah, this probably, that's the idea, at least the general idea. And yeah, let's maybe, but why this attack works for smartbands? That's a very fair question. It's like, this attack is by no means any new. Like, there have been published numerous researchers. It's even back in 2000, when this first 20 years ago, when first version of TLS emerged, and many of those studies pointed out that there are some potential privacy leaks that are associated with this TLS protocol. Most of them are in different domains, though, but it's by no means any new. What we argue is that why is it so different for smartbands is that you can controllably send any data you want, because if you are just accessing some random websites, you're not at liberty to send any data. At most, you can maybe fill some forms if there are any, but the rest is predetermined. Like, you access this address, it's always this address, or you access this page to read this piece of news, it's always this page. It will be always the same. But here you can send practically any data you want. You can do fake workouts at 1 minute, at 1 second, at 200 hours. You practically can do anything. And with possible unlimited number of inputs, you can construct anything you want. And by you constructing this marginal data, by this very unlikely data, you can establish some very, very maybe unexpected patterns in the encrypted traffic and utilize it in order to find privacy leaks. Secondly, there is no any countermeasures as far as I know, because I've been studying lots of different smartband apps. I mean, later we propose like super secure, but they are not super secure. But my point is that they don't consider it seriously. They just send it. Yeah, some send it like in JSON format, some send it some weird encoding, but no one does some, like, you know, dummy packets or some, you know, delayed packets. They just send it without any concern about potential of this attack. So no measures, meaning that it's a lot easier for researchers to establish such vulnerabilities. And then constant pool of IP addresses, because of course they might be changing, but more often than not, they're constant. And once you gather all possible IP addresses for the server you're trying to target, you'll be able to do this filtering, like in this traffic filtering, so to establish mass profiling. Yeah. Besides, it's kind of a risk-free out-of-jail card for an attacker. It's impossible to prove guilty. Like, how would you prove guilty? Like, even if somehow you're able to bring the adversary to court, what will you say? Oh, this guy copied the packet that I sent to it voluntarily. I mean, this is not even like an attack. Like I was just like, yeah, it's extremely hard to prove unless like you confess, yeah, I use this data for malicious purposes. It's almost impossible to bring to justice an attacker. Unlike, for instance, imagine we have like these other attacks. Let me go here. Just a curious piece of information. These attacks with, like for example, here we remember we talk what is the most probable attack vector. Attacks on servers or attacks on devices are severely punished. As much as like I think the latest, I think I heard about 23 years punishment for someone who is like 20 years old. So like a 20-year-old hacker hacked like a database, a bank database, and he got 23 years old in prison, like max security prison. Like, you know, it's like Alcatraz, like prison in like where rapers and other guys. So it's not a very enjoyable time spending, I assume. Although like this MiraiNet guy, MiraiNet botnet, is probably the most known botnet out there. This guy got a probation because he complied with he did like a, how do you call it, complied with FBI, not complied. Well, they basically explained everything to them. And I think they got him like a fine, and basically he escaped jail. But still, nowadays the sentencing for cybercrimes are real, and they are, in often cases they're like you can get more than for a murder. So it's no one really wants to risk that much. Although it's easier to evade being caught than actually catch someone who is proficient in this, but still the risk is quite high, and you have to be like prepared to face the consequences. Here, the adversary is like a risk free. You just observe encrypted packets, you collect it. It's part of your duty. You're not doing anything illegal, so it's good. And then also country. Like if, for instance, I am sending data from United States to China, and my like this malicious, curious but honest but curious ISP somewhere in India, how like what is it like? Which country's legislation is it breaking? Is it United States? Is it China? Is it India? Like where should it be like, you know, judged by laws of which country? Hard really to say. And also, again, like legislations like GDPR or like maybe some American legislation that they're not working because, first of all, it's not like even sharing the data. It's even like its data is encrypted. So they are actually following GDPR in principle, but also it's not in Europe anymore. And yeah, so it's getting kind of hard. And yeah, possible countermeasures that we kind of cooked up on the fly, which are maybe not the best, but at least I think they would prevent most of the attacks for most of the devices. They are like modifying this ratio of text. Of course, you cannot decrease because you would lose data, but you can add some dummy text in the end before writing it to the server or before even sending, and then at the server side, you will strip the dummies. So it would be append some nonce, and then, you know, perhaps it would confuse the attacker. Although it still would, attacker would still be able to see the nonce with man in the middle, but it still might be harder to do this like hand-coded, handcrafted metadata patterns that we talked about. Like, for example, if it's like 3 packets consecutively, one packet is 200 bytes, second packet is 300 bytes, and fourth packet is 400 bytes, third packet is 400 bytes, then it's heart rate data of above 100 BPMs. It would be a lot harder to do this kind of stuff. And also concealing frequency, by that we mean that, for instance, if, let's say, if we don't send data immediately, because most of the bands, if you like pull down the app, it instantly sends all the data to the server. Is it as it is now, at least according to my experience. And if, for instance, it will be some delay sending, not right now, but perhaps, I don't know, an hour later, or maybe like 1 day later, then it would be maybe perhaps a little bit more secure. And also randomness, which means that we do not always send the packet in the same order, but try to mix them. It will be a lot harder also to do this hand-coded rules for metadata. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Thanks, I guess. And yeah, if any questions you have, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation, Andrei. So I have one question.
Yeah.
This kind of attack that you presented, I can see that it is indeed an attack that can be used to extract information, but I wonder, has someone done it for research at a very extensive level, at the point of being able to say, look, if I am an ISP and I observe for 1 year, I can get this exact specific information. So what I want to know is there any research that says, okay, if my ISP is doing it, in 5 years of observing my data, they will be able to pinpoint this, and this of me? Because the feeling sometimes might be that, yeah, what is the point if you know whether my heart rate is below or above 100? So I wonder if there are some results that show, yeah, indeed, that we can get this specific with enough data and time.
Yeah, that's a very, very fair question and very interesting, very on point, I would say. The idea is that actually this attack was not introduced before me, like a little bit flattering, but there have been attacks in other domains, that kind of attacks. But for smartbands, it was us who kind of decided to explore this idea. And so hence there were no actually anyone who would do it for a year, but it's what we were looking to do. It's not, that's was on our agenda to intercept traffic for a long time. Of course, we are not an ISP, we cannot possibly gather like data from millions of users, but we can set up like a local something, like a local subnet with maybe perhaps some users sending some other unrelated YouTube traffic or something else, and then some users sending actual data, and then trying to, because it would be also because we obviously cannot estimate the number of false positive. I assume there should be some false positive, but with very carefully crafted handcrafted rules, I think it should be, I can't say, but my intuition tells me that there should be like minimum, and it would be a very, very interesting experiment to do. Although the question on how big of a scale we are able to do it is also a point of conversation, because yeah, maybe we can cook up something like 10 machines at most in our lab or something like this, but other people will say, okay, it's not real like mass surveillance, it's not in the same kind of proportion as real mass surveillance, so it's good for nothing. But my intuition tells me that it should be possible. And addressing like this second part of the question, how is it important that I know that this user has this particular heart band on that day? Because it's not just heart rate, I meant. It's not just heart rate. For instance, for this band that I have on the slide, we were able to see not just heart rate, but also a workout duration, workout frequency, sleep frequency, not how many hours you have slept, but how often do you sleep. So for instance, if a person like, maybe like has active night life or something, and not often taking sleep during this hour, because we know we have timestamps. Remember, timestamps are not concealed by CCL, so by TLS also. So we can see that this packet was sent at this time. So we can say, okay, this person sleeps like during the day or something else. Or we can say that this person works out every day, so probably a healthy person. Or in a contrary, person doesn't work out every day. We can also, we were able to detect when person inputs weight inside the app. So if I know that a person inputs weight like every day, probably some either maybe, I don't know, overweight or perhaps underweight, or perhaps very caring about the diet. So you can profile users based on that just, and this is enough. It might be enough to do like if you have all this data, sleep data, heart rate data. For some, we were able to do like this caffeine data, the caffeine junkies who, I mean, probably no one records caffeine in their smartband, but still, if someone does it, you can say, okay, this guy is like a caffeine junkie, and perhaps this info might be useful, especially if you know this data for many users, not for just one user. If I am like ISP in United Kingdom, and I know that there are many UK, there is a specific UK band that, I don't know, maybe 50% of population of UK uses, or of like 50% of the market of UK is this band, then I know what I'm looking for. I know that 50% of the people who are using band are using this UK band. So I'm a local ISP. I set up like my rules. I collect the data, and I have the data about a lot of people. Maybe not that important. I cannot say exactly how many hours they slept, what they're doing, but I can say, okay, this guy, like maybe 50% of population works out every day. Another half do not do anything. Okay, as I say, I can say, okay, this information might be useful to someone. I can sell it. So it's not worthless, I would say. I would argue.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very interested in seeing if you manage to in the future to do some of these experiments. That would be very, very interesting, because yeah, I believe it's the hard part of this kind of research, having some experiments that you can say, yes, this looks like to be in real life. So, but I think that would be very, very interesting to see exactly how much you can pinpoint people if you follow, yeah, all these different information that you can get. So I think that's extremely interesting. I believe Swan raised his hand.
Probably not.
Maybe, yeah, maybe not. Okay, by mistake. But does anyone else have any questions?
Just mention that I try to. Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Some problem with the microphone. I just I can connect it again. Okay, I have a question about the tool you use to analyze the packet which transfer from device to the cloud or to the other layer, higher layer. So I use this tool to the tool you saw this one. Okay, but it works for the not for all protocol transfer. Some of them, and the one drawback of this tool, they not support automatically dynamic analysis. So you have any way to analyze in the host number?
You mean to do like a runtime analysis, not a local analysis?
Yes.
Yes, there is like this intrusion detection system Snort. Although it doesn't work with TLS, it only works with IP level. It's still possible to cop, because there can be a transition between TLS to IP. You have to use, like, we personally use like T-Shark. There is a library for Wireshark.
Yes, T-Shark also, yes.
But it's very slow, and it's not very convenient, but it's possible to first plug it up into T-Shark, and then it would break up TLS, and then after that, first plug it to Snort, and after Snort plug it to, because Snort would spit IP packets that are only relevant for those particular cloud storage that we are interested in. And after, because Snort is very fast, it works on a lower level. And after Snort spit up the packets that we are interested in, they would go into T-Shark. And then T-Shark, in T-Shark, you can easily apply handcrafted rules. And T-Shark would spit out the activities, or perhaps like labels or whatever you are interested in, hours of sleep. Like, it's possible to run it on runtime, but the question is, first of all, you have to have enormous computing power to do it, because a real ISP processes millions of packets, not just like home setup. So it's possible to do runtime, but probably it's easier just to store it locally, because I suspect, at least my intuition is that majority of the traffic, like 99.9999%, wouldn't be towards the targeted server, because servers in principle ideally should be isolated to only receive the database data, the data that users sent about their health. So if you can just put it aside and record it and later analyze it, I think this is more realistic, because of course, if you have like unlimited power, you can do it on runtime and just speed it like in real time, what is sending, who is sending what. but it's very expensive, I would say.
Okay, this time for the dynamic analysis, something like this. Thank you very much. Okay, I don't have any more questions. Okay.
Any more questions?
I guess no.
Then I would like to thank you, Andrei, for the very, very interesting presentation. And also thank you everyone for attending. And yeah, our next seminar will be in 3 weeks.